Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome. I am Ling Chong, and today we have the honor of having Maureen with us to talk about setting healthy boundaries in relationships. Welcome, Maureen.
Very nice to be with you all.
And just to let you know a little bit about Maureen, she has boundless energies, and she has been a meditator and a teacher of Raja Yoga for 40 over years. And her boundless energies have taken her to do many and achieve many things. Some of these things, I'm wondering how many people would ever be able to do that. Maureen was the organizer of the Future of Powers project in India, and she has organized 50 programs in 50 cities all over India. Congratulations, Maureen. That was a great success. She's also the founder of KILT, a social enterprise for the landmine survivors in Cambodia. And I've been to one of those landmine museums. Great job. She was the former chairperson for Unity for Peace in Hong Kong and has, as I said earlier, been a meditation teacher and speaker for more than 40 years. A warm welcome again, Maureen.
Thank you.
Now today, Maureen is going to talk about setting healthy boundaries in relationships. So the thing that first came into my mind when I heard the topic was, I never thought one would need to set boundaries in relationships. So I was wondering, what boundaries should we set? And does it go across the board for all relationships or only certain relationships?
Well, very nice to be with you. And yes, it's a very, I would say a very important topic, because when people are asked, often when people are asked, what is love? They will say unconditional. But I invite you all to think about that. How it really works. Does it mean letting people do whatever they want, treat you however they want to treat you? What does it mean? So there's a very beautiful saying that says that we need to always love according to the law. And I found this very interesting, because we don't often associate laws with love, but actually there are many laws, natural laws, healthy laws around love, like non-attachment, non-possession, giving each other freedom. So there are actually laws around love, and boundaries, I think, is about putting those in place. And maybe it would be best for me to tell you a story which will help you to understand what I'm talking about when I'm talking about boundaries. So there was a couple, they went to a psychologist, and they said, our son has a problem. And they said to the psychologist, he stopped going to school almost a year ago. He finished his high school. He's not studying. He's not looking for a job. He's not working. And so the psychologist asked the parents, so where is he living? He doesn't have any money because he hasn't got a job. Where's he living? Oh, he's living with us, they said. And what's he eating? Oh, we are feeding him. And when he wants to go anywhere, does he walk? If he doesn't have any money, how can he go out? Oh, we let him use the car. So the psychologist then asked the parents, doesn't sound like he's got any problem at all. And so what we can see is that this is a situation where there are no boundaries. And what's important in boundaries and in relationships is that people, or in life generally, that we experience the consequences of our actions, of our decisions. And the big question I want you to reflect on, were these parents loving this child? Were they loving their son? Is that love? Is that unconditional love?
Wow.
I would hesitate to say it was, because actually I would say that they are only doing all of this because of fear. Because, you know, often when we start to put restrictions on people, they get very angry. They tell us they don't love us. They do all kinds of things. And so there's emotional manipulation that goes on. So I would say that wasn't an act of love of the parents. It was fear driving them. And if that boy was to get married, I mean, imagine what kind of a person he would be in a relationship. So I would say this is not love. What do you think? Mrs. Chong, what do you think?
Great question. You know, I'm just reflecting as you were talking about Asian values and Asian mindsets. See, in our Asian mindset, they would call it love, or I would say they've absolutely spoiled him rotten. But by the same token, they have never taught them to learn to be independent.
Exactly.
So
and there are laws around love, and that is that we, you know, my definition that I like very much for love comes from Scott Peck, and it says that love is to extend yourself for your own or another's spiritual growth. And I would say that this child, this son, is not even a child anymore, is not growing. He's actually regressing into a dependent state. But of course, it's very difficult to put boundaries. Like, what would the parents do now? Are they going to push him out of the house? And I don't think it's just Asia. I think all over the world, you will get this situation. And they talk about tough love, but it's actually very hard to start to do something. So for me, I was thinking, what would I do in that situation? And I think what I would do is start with small boundaries, maybe leave the bigger ones a bit later, but I would not let him use the car. He could ask, I wouldn't give any money unless he asked for it. So if he asked me, he could get bus money and he can get the bus. So he has to experience at least some discomfort, some reality, and then slowly I would start creating more and more healthy boundaries in the relationship, because the big question to ask is, if I don't set a boundary, what will happen to this relationship? Where is it going to go? And that's the very important thing. The relationship won't get any better. It is definitely going to get worse, because the dependency becomes more and more the fear, the habit of what's going on. And so it's very hard to enact a boundary. But when I ask myself, what will happen if I don't, then I think I would become very, very clear that it's essential for the well-being of the other person, but also myself. So this is not being selfish. You know, a narcissist only thinks of themselves, but healthy narcissism is when I look after myself without hurting you and without causing any damage to you. This is healthy, because someone without boundaries, often they allow abuse. They allow themselves to be abused. And this is what we call codependency. So I'm not independent. I'm not even interdependent. I'm dependent. We are dependent on each other. And so, you know, we talk about going from being independent to interdependent. where it's very healthy. The relationship becomes very healthy. There's no interdependency here. There's only dependence. So of course it's not healthy.
See, I would like to ask you a question. This is something that happened to me. One day I met a friend, and he actually was one of our bankers. And he said to me, he said, how much do you send your children every month? Because at that time, our children was in Melbourne studying. So I said, oh, we give him this much, which we know is enough for him, but we give him an extra 10% so that he could go out with friends, have coffee, or sometimes go to the cinema. And he said, what? How can you survive on that? I said, of course they can. I've been a student in Australia and I manage, so I know they can manage. But my son keeps calling every few days, a week, and he keeps asking money. I said, then don't give it to him. I can't, he said. I said, why not? He's my only son. And
actually, Mrs. Chong, research has proven that when we give too much, that person doesn't do well in their life. They've done research on even giving a house to your children. When your children don't struggle, how can they become strong? So, healthy boundaries are actually based on love. And like they say, there's two key motivations: fear and love. And I need to transform all my behavior into being loveful and not fearful. And I'll tell you another story. There was a mother, I was giving this talk in Australia. You see, it happens in Australia too. And one of the ladies asked me, she said, my 6-year-old daughter won't stop playing with her, iPad or whatever she's playing with when she's supposed to be having dinner. And I said, she's how old? And she said, 6 years old. And I said, you don't have any management of a 6-year-old? What's going to happen when she's 16? This is really dangerous. Actually, it's very dangerous to not have boundaries, because what they do when they're 16 and don't listen to you is a lot more serious than when they're 6. And I told her, I said, probably you are working full time, you're a single mother, and you don't have time to discipline her. Is that correct? And she said, you've got it. And I said, look, if I was you, I would even more move into a smaller house, reduce my expenses so I could work less, because this is so important. Otherwise, you're not being fair to your daughter. You have brought this little girl into the world, and it's your duty to bring her up in a healthy way, also with healthy boundaries herself. So I think it's very, very important to start when they're young, because it's easier. And children actually thrive with boundaries. They don't like being totally free. They feel secure when they've got some boundaries. So again, it's not love, it's carelessness, it's not having a right perspective, because I know that mother needed to earn money, but I would live simply. I would think that the most important thing is to empower that child with the right values, the right strength to carry on with the rest of their life. So I think she's doing a great, great, great damage to her child by allowing that kind of behavior. What do you think?
You are absolutely right. Because when we were young, our parents taught us that we must work. We must all contribute to the housework and all that. So I started working at a very young age. At the age of 7, I have to look after my brothers. I had to go to the market and sell vegetables, things like that, to help the family, sort of thing. So we grew up understanding what responsibility is.
Yeah, and what hard work is, because sometimes children don't even realize what it is to earn an income and manage budgets and things like that. So I can see you've done very well from that little bit strict training.
Okay. Dad was very strict. Dad was very strict because he came to Malaysia at the age of 10 on the deck of a boat, which took him 10 days from Canton to Singapore.
Yeah.
So can you imagine what kind of life we had when we were young?
Yeah.
Everything was strict, but we enjoyed ourselves. Like you said, you were very, very right. We thrived when there is this feeling of independence that you could do something to help your family, and
Yeah.
you show love back to your family by helping wherever you can. So I just a little bit of what happened to me when I was a child. We get up at 5:30 in the morning, and Dad was the only one working, and there are 13 mouths to feed. 13.
Yeah.
So it was tough. But we knew what it is like to be tough, and we knew that um, we had to do our bit to help, and, and
Mm.
and we had that great feeling of being able to help. So I realized what you were saying, and now I understand what you mean by setting boundaries.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that was setting boundaries.
Right.
You've
And
got to
I'm
do this, you've got to do that before you go to school.
yeah.
So that's what we had to do.
Yeah. And I mentioned about being codependent. I would say nearly all, probably 90% of relationships are codependent. And when we've got this unhealthy dependency on each other, then we're not healthy in ourselves, we're not healthy in our relationships. And some of the signs of that is that it's like walking on eggs. You can't say anything because there'll be an explosion. You allow the other person to mistreat you. So these are some of the signs of a codependent relationship. And sometimes you hear the way children talk to their parents. I can imagine that little 6-year-old, how she would talk to her mother, because it's you're not playing the role. And I mean, there's just roles. We are all souls, so we're all spiritual beings. We're all equal as spirits, but we're playing roles. So there's a mother, there's a child, there's a father. These are roles that we play, and we learn responsibility by playing those roles well and taking responsibility to do that. As I said, this mother wasn't really taking proper responsibility for her child. I don't blame her, because sometimes life is very difficult and you just manage what you can manage. But what we need to do is think of the long-term consequences, look into the future and see what are the priorities in my life now. And this is very important, because it's not a matter of managing time in a limited sense, but we need to see what I need to pay attention to, that if I don't pay attention now, it will become a serious problem in the future. So I need to pay attention, for example, to my health, to diet, to exercise, to relationships, because if I don't, they're no problem today, but in the future, without paying proper attention, they will become a crisis. And then what happens is all these crises are kind of ongoing, and we didn't prevent them. We let them happen, and then we don't know how to manage life because there's so many crises, health and relationships and planning. So it's really a matter of what we say, seeing the three aspects of time: the past, the present, and the future. So we can learn from the past and not be conditioned by our past, but learn from experiences. Like you've learned from your experiences, you've grown from those experiences. And then looking to the future, what will be the future result of my behavior? Because there are consequences. Every choice we make, everything we speak, think, do, there are consequences. So I need to be responsible for my thoughts, words, and actions for my own self. This is not even looking at others, but just for my own well-being and my own peace of mind. Because so often we're not making choices that will bring a good future for us, a good, healthy, balanced future. So I just wonder if there's any questions from the audience, because this would be great if it's a bit of a conversation, because we all, I think, struggle with this aspect of boundaries. So if you could just see if there's any questions. And just while they're coming up.
What are the telltale signs of how do we know if we need to set boundaries in relationships? Now you've talked about that, so I think I hope they have understood that. But are there telltale signs? Do we need to consciously set them?
Yes, I think the way we know is if the relationship, we can see if a relationship is healthy or not healthy. And as I said, one of the main signs is that we're starting to accept abuse and we can't communicate. We can't say what's on our mind. We can't be honest. And another aspect of, or what I've learned in my life, is some work called nonviolent communication, which has helped me to be able to express myself without blaming or judging, but just identifying my feelings based on my needs and being able to communicate that to the other person, what I'm feeling without blaming them. I take responsibility for my feelings, but then I need to be able to say something to the other person when there is discomfort, when there's something not going right in our relationship. And if I don't know how to communicate, I'm scared that I might hurt the other person, or I might get angry, or I might become emotional and cry. So we tend to not communicate. And that is very sad. That is very sad, because the basis of a relationship is honesty. And when we talk about living in community, which I've lived in community for over 40 years, if we're not able to communicate, it's what we call a pseudo community. It's not real community. We just function, but because we know everyone's sensitive points, so we walk around it. So that's the other big sign when I'm tiptoeing around others. If I'm tiptoeing around others, it means I'm not being honest. I'm not communicating what I'm feeling. I'm avoiding that communication with that person.
Coming back to this friend of mine that I spoke about, and his fear. Now I understand it. I understood at the time. Now I understand better, having listened to you, that he was so scared of losing his son, perhaps because he had spoiled him all this time, and he didn't know what to do. Now, what would you do if that happened? If it was a scenario presented to you?
Well, as I said, I would start with smaller boundaries. Like I would start the conversation perhaps with his son and say, you know, I have been supporting you this much up to now, but, you know, it's really good if you learn the value of money and hard work. So now I'm going to reduce that, and I would like you to get a job so that you can earn something and you start to know what is that world out there, because otherwise it's very unreal. You know, the world that the Father's creating is unreal. It's not a reality, because no one's going to support us as we go forward in life. I mean, maybe the dad will keep supporting, but I would say it's not healthy. And something could happen to the dad that he can't support, you know. So it's important that we are empowering. As I said, love is to extend myself. So it's to grow. So the father needs to grow in this way as well. He needs to grow in his self-confidence, because it sounds like he's coming from, sometimes it's fear and sometimes it's innocence. You know, we call it innocence,
Maybe
but
you think
it's
it's
almost
love.
ignorant. It's almost ignorant because it's not an educated way to behave. So let's say it's innocence, but he's not helping his son.
Mhm.
And we've seen this again and again with people we know. You know, I think you've got examples of people you know where their parents spoilt them and they weren't successful in their life. So what does the father want? Does the father want his son to be successful or to be a dependent person? And dependency creates sorrow. It erodes your self-esteem, your self-confidence, your self-worth, and it gives you this illusion that you are something when you're not, because he's not successful. He might act successful with his friends because he's got this and got that, but he's not successful. He's just supported like a puppet. He's just like a puppet. There's no grounding in what he's achieved.
Mhm. Another question has just come in. If I'm tiptoeing around someone, what kind of boundaries do I need to set?
The main thing here is to learn how to communicate. So what you need to do is you need to make a time to sit with the person. Don't say it like that, you know, like in a time that's just going to become an argument or the other person's going to get upset. But you would say to the other person, when you did this, and be very specific, and don't say because you did this, but when you did this, I felt this because I'm needing this. See, you always bring it back to your own needs, or I would really long for this in our relationship, and making a request without a demand. And then you ask the person, how do you feel about what I've said? How do you feel about what I'm asking? And have a conversation. If they don't understand or they disagree, you know, just try to listen and listen and listen, because they've probably got their side of the situation that I also need to listen to. And one of the most important things in relationships when it comes to communication is listening. We're not very good at listening and being fully present. You know, often we half listen, or while we're listening, we're thinking of some excuse or some counter argument, but to really just be fully present and listen. And when you do this, you can see the body language of the other person. You know, they feel empty of all this pent up feeling that's going on inside them. So that's why I've gone into quite deeply nonviolent communication. It's the work of Marshall Rosenberg, and it's widely available on the internet. You just Google nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg, and you will find so many talks and so much information. But because communication is so poor, because what we generally do is we blame and judge people without even being aware of it. Because you did this, I felt like this, or I feel like you. That's not a feeling, that's a judgment. I feel that you. That's not a feeling. Feeling is like I feel sad, I feel worried, I feel concerned, I feel, you know, heavy. You know, it's a feeling in the body. Actually, you can feel it in your body when there's some true feeling and the other's not feeling. So let's pause here and just go into one of those feelings. Can we just think? I would ask you to think of a relationship where it's a bit stuck. You are not being honest with the other person. You feel that the communication is broken down, and you just try to get in touch with your feelings. What are you feeling? Sad, angry, afraid,
Lost.
worried? What are you
Sometimes you
feeling?
get lost.
We're just going to do this reflection with everyone. So I'd like everyone to do this. So just think what you're feeling and why you're feeling that. What are you needing in this relationship? What are you needing that's or longing for, or what would make the relationship better? What is that? Okay, now think about what you might be able to ask of the other person. Just think what you might be able to ask. It's not a demand, it's really like a request.
How can I help you? Would that be a relevant question? How can I help you not behave like that?
Yeah. So just everyone, please think of one relationship. And if you feel that you need help with this, that could also be a question. So boundaries also, to put boundaries, we probably need to improve our communication. So we're not getting angry and blaming and being unhealthy in our way of responding.
Maureen, I've got another question here.
Yeah.
Sometimes grandparents spoil the grandchildren, and grandparents also have different opinions to the child's parent. What can the parent do?
Yeah, well, again, if you could try, this is a tricky one, I know, but if you could try and speak with the grandparents and, give them clear examples. Don't say you always, you need to say the other day when you allowed the children to jump on the sofa, I felt tired because I'm constantly asking them not to do that because it damages the sofa, and I'm concerned that they could fall down or break something, and I'm really needing your support in bringing up the children. And how you could support me is by understanding why I'm asking the children to do things that maybe you would let them do. So would you mind, just asking me what are some of those things that I am a little bit strict with the children about that you don't agree with? Can we have that conversation? See, that's an example.
That's a great answer, and that's great, great knowledge. Because very often we ourselves as parents are a bit scared of the grandparents too, sort of.
Yeah.
That they might think, grandparents usually does that. They usually spoil the grandchildren.
Yeah.
And then when you try to sort of say something to them, they might get upset. But your way of looking at it and asking their help is great. That's a great answer. Thank you.
And let me just share another grandparent story. When I was in Indonesia, I was meeting with a group of ladies, and one of the ladies said that her children ask her to mind the grandchildren. However, the grandchildren have no respect for her. They don't speak to her politely. They don't listen to her. And she's starting to feel that she's just a babysitter. And I think the parents are not lacking too much in money. I don't know what that's about. But what I said to the grandmother is I would speak to your children and tell them that you will look after the children if you can play the role of a grandmother, which means that they will watch the videos that you will introduce to them, that they will speak with you, respectfully and listen to you. And if the children are not going to do that, then I'm not going to be a babysitter. I will be a grandmother, but I won't be a babysitter. So it's a pretty firm boundary. But imagine if that grandmother just let this go on and on. It's really sad, absolutely sad. And the children are missing out on the wisdom of a grandmother. And I suggested, you get some videos like environmental videos showing animals and different, educational but wonderful videos that you can watch together. But if they're just going to come and ignore you, just, what they do, they walk in, they've got their iPads, they sit down and they watch something violent and they expect you to get them a drink and do all these things. No, I think that's not the laws of love. That's breaking the laws of love. So we need to put boundaries there. I think so, because in the long run, everyone benefits from the boundary.
Yes. Here's another question, Maureen. The pandemic has caused spikes in relationship breakups and divorces. What has caused this, and is there something families and couples facing challenges can do?
Yeah, really. It's also led to a lot more violence because people are home, they're drinking more, and where there was violence in a relationship, verbal, physical, there's no escape. You're kind of stuck at home in that relationship. And so in Australia, it's actually one of the reasons why you can go out. If there's a threat of any violence, you can actually go out of your home and go somewhere else, because it's really become a very serious problem. And so when we're in lockdown, again, set boundaries. So decide when you're going to be together and when you're not going to be together. Hopefully you've got 2 rooms, so you don't have to share the same room all day. But just a story on this, I remember a woman in Hong Kong. She would come home from work, and her husband, they were both working full-time, managerial jobs, very full on. And when her husband would come home, he would start dumping on her. Like probably he's upset with someone in the office or something going on at the office, but he would come home and dump on his wife. So what she said to him after she learned about these boundaries, she said, I'm going to the other room. The door is open if you want to talk with me, but I'm not here to listen to this. And she would walk over to the other room, not close the door, a very clear message that there's a boundary here. I'm not here to be dumped on, because she's also exhausted. She's got to tend to the children. The mother-in-law was living at home. She's got actually a lot of more to do when she comes home. She doesn't have the energy for this person to dump. Another woman, her husband used to shout at her, and so she would just go over and start painting. She was learning painting, and she would go and sit down and paint. And he came over to her and he said, what are you doing painting? When we're having an argument. And she just kept quiet. She just kept painting, just giving the message that I'm not interested to argue. So these women demonstrated very powerful communication, that I'm here to be with you, but I'm not here to be abused. I'm not here to listen to all your dumping. I'm here to be a companion. So, we really need to think creatively. Another woman, her daughter's always telling her off when she does things the daughter doesn't like, because she's spiritual and the daughter thinks this is all funny stuff. And so her daughter would often, get upset. So she would write a letter to her daughter. And when she heard her daughter coming in the house, she'd get in the shower and just let the water run over her. So she just let it all wash away. And then when she came out, she was in a better state to face whatever the daughter wanted to say, because the big thing was out and she was putting herself in a state where she was more able to listen. So very interesting. I think mothers and women are so creative in this way. I'm sure men are too, but for some reason I'm remembering more the stories of women. I'll have to try and think of some stories I've heard from men.
There's another question here. Apart from learning to set boundaries for the self, do I also need to consider learning how not to overstep the other's boundary?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, sometimes we're also stepping over the boundary, being demanding or not giving others space or having expectations even. You know, I don't have a right to have expectations of others. I can be clear about what our roles are, but, you know, especially the expectation that others can be like me, that's not really going to work. So I have to also be careful not to overstep boundaries. And again, it's good to ask people how you're doing, you know, like if you notice that when you walk in the house, they go to another room, you know, you could wait for the right moment and say, I noticed that when I came in the house, you went to the other room. And I'm just wondering what you feel in my company. And if you want to express something, because I feel something's going on here, you know, so just invite them to share with you what they're feeling, having empathy, being with the other person, and just let them empty before you say anything. And also don't say anything unless you are say, is it okay if I share with you what's going on for me when I hear you say that? You know, so really not pushing communication.
Some ladies might feel that if they do that, they're being subservient. What do you feel?
Subservient in what way?
So if they were to say that, would they feel that, you know, would it make them feel subservient?
In what way would it be subservient?
Like, I'm not happy that you said this to me or that to me. And, you know, how should I put that question to you?
No, you could say, okay, maybe someone said something that's quite hurtful. So again, you say to them, when I heard you say, and exactly say the words, don't say when you got angry with me, when you rejected me, when you put me down. That's all judgment. You've got to be very clear. When I heard you say, da, 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 I felt, and just what you felt. Not I felt like, I felt that you, I felt, what did I feel in my body? And I'm needing to understand, or I'm needing to feel, you know, comfortable in our relationship. Whatever you want to say, what are you needing? And then, you know, can you, you know, maybe try to say what you just said, but in a way that I feel, you know, not so uncomfortable. You know, can we have this conversation?
What if some ladies seem to feel that if they say that they're afraid, you know, they're afraid to express themselves?
Yeah, but that's not healthy, to be afraid to express yourself. And this is why I think, together with learning about boundaries, we need to learn about healthy communication, where I can really listen and understand and not use any violence like judgment and blaming. So it seems that the two go very much together. Good communication is also needed with those boundaries. Otherwise, the boundaries are just come across as anger and force.
Yeah, I suppose different societies have different mindsets, perhaps, you know. And in today's area, or even if they have stopped working, but they used to work before, and self-esteem, would that come into the picture as well?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you another amazing story about this woman who came to see me. She was earning more money than her husband. She was a highly professional person. But her husband started to become very violent with her. In fact, she had 11 broken bones from him, 11 broken bones. And I said to her, you know, I think it's your consciousness. You are allowing your husband to abuse you by not standing in your own dignity. And, you know, she then changed her consciousness. And, you know, she told me he didn't hit her for nearly a year. Nearly a year he didn't hit her. And then she told me she let her consciousness slip and he broke her toe, you know, but he even took her shopping for the first time in 10 years. He took her shopping. It was a big thing. But how interesting that it was her consciousness that was almost asking for this abuse. Yeah. Oh, it's and I've seen this in other people. So I'm not saying it's your fault if someone abuses you, but we can have a defense of that self-worth, that self-dignity, that self-esteem. You know, there was an expression, I don't hear it so much now, but there was an expression, don't even think about it. You know, where you really put out this vibration, don't even think about it. And it's kind of like an inner strength that you're not going to allow that kind of behavior anymore.
Yes, yes. And another question is coming. How do you handle people, close relationships, who has ego, anger because of different opinions?
Yeah, again, often it's because they're not heard. So you'll find that somebody shouts when they feel you're not listening to them. And often it's not even you. They weren't listened to at home. They weren't listened to by other people. And so they feel to be heard, they need to shout. So if you start to listen, and I did this nonviolent communication training in a drug rehabilitation center in Argentina, I remember. And one of the men stood up and said at the end of that, he said, I'm going to go home on the weekend. Now I'm going to make an appointment with my wife for this weekend, and I want to just listen to her. I'm going to suggest that she has 3 hours just to talk, and I won't interrupt. I will just listen. So he recognized that the biggest problem in the relationship was that he wasn't listening. So I thought that was just great. And why I remember it was there, because it was an addiction program they were on. And the coordinator of that center, he said, most addiction comes because of no diction. And I thought that was interesting because Spanish speaking, but he knew the English. Addiction is because of no diction, no ability to speak.
Yeah.
And so most of our problems come from our inability to calmly, peacefully, non-violently communicate. Often when we communicate, we make things worse, which is why sometimes it's better not to say anything. Just send good wishes, pure feelings, and keep it up. Keep it up. Be patient. And that sometimes can bring it around more than words.
You just brought to my memory One of my aunts, my father's sister, lived with us. She came from China. She lived with us and she looked after us when we were young, helped look after us when we were little. She got married and her husband is a very quiet man. Sometimes when she complains, he would just keep quiet and never say a thing. And she would get even more angry. And how do you deal with a situation like that?
Yeah, it happened to me when I started to learn nonviolent communication. Somebody shouted at me, and I thought, oh, okay, let me think whether what they're saying is true, what they're saying, accusing me of is true, first of all, and then let me think how I'm going to respond. So I just said to the person, okay, let me think about it and I'll come back to you. And he got so angry. He said, okay, Miss Cool as a cucumber. And he was very angry because I didn't react. But actually, people don't like it when they're angry and you're not angry. It makes them more angry because it makes them feel bad. If you're angry, they're not so bad. You're both angry. It's normal. But when you stop being angry, then it's hard for other people. Yeah. In fact, one of the ladies, her daughter said, I hate living with you. It's like living with Mother Teresa. Because she couldn't fight with her. She couldn't argue. She just was so peaceful.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes they will say that I just have to tolerate. But that's not really toleration, is it?
No. That's not tolerance. Yeah.
So how would you set a boundary in this instance?
Yeah. Well, again, we need to, if somebody's angry, again, what I need to do is listen to what they're needing, not what they're saying, but why are they saying it? What are they needing? So then I might say to the person, it sounds like you're needing, and if it's not what they're needing, they'll tell you, no, you don't understand, and say, well, can you help me understand? I'm trying to listen to what you're asking for and what you're really wanting from me, and just keep being calm and persevering in that calmness to try and bring out from the person what's really going on, because it's often got nothing to do with what they're saying. It's more just, a cry, a shout out because they're in pain, because their needs are not being met.
Another question here. Is there such a thing as setting unhealthy boundaries?
Well, boundaries are not walls. So if you make a wall, that is unhealthy. That can be hiding. You can be hiding behind a wall. So boundaries need to be flexible. They need to, be, brought down as much as possible, because we don't really want boundaries. These are only put up when they're necessary. Actually, the best relationships have no boundaries. It's just that we need to often put them up when the relationship is unhealthy. And as has been said, relationships are for cooperation. Think about that. That's what relationships are for. And so, as much as we can cooperate, then we don't need these boundaries. But if someone's abusive of me, if someone's taking advantage of me, manipulating me, I need to put a boundary. Like even one person with a mental problem, he used to call me 5 or 6 times a day. And I felt sorry for him. I don't want to say, don't call me. So I said, you can call me once a day, but only once. So I let him call me once a day, and he would speak maybe 5 minutes. I mean, he needs to talk to someone. I mean, what's he going to do? So I will, extend myself because of love. And that helps me to grow. It helps the other person to grow. So I think, but there's a boundary. I'll only let that person call once a day. Otherwise, he'll call 10 times a day.
Yeah, yes.
But I don't want to completely reject someone because of a mental illness, because they're still living. They still need love. They still need connection. They still need to be heard. So I would just limit it. And even when people are gossiping or saying the same thing over and over again, I would, say, oh yeah, we can meet on this date for this long. And I would just limit everything. So I can still be kind. I can still, be available. I can give of myself, but in a limit. I can't sit with someone 3 hours while they say the same thing over and over again. That's not, because I resent it. I don't enjoy it. And that's not good for the other person. I know what I can do and how much I can do where I feel, okay, this I think is reasonable, because, and then slowly I might be able to bring that person around by, through the boundaries and through the communication. So we don't want to be hard and mean. So I think we've come to our time, is it, Mrs. Chong?
Yes, we have. I was just wondering whether you could just answer one last question.
I think there's a time for question answers later. What am I'm just looking at the program here. Is that correct?
No, we
oh no, that's right. We've still got another 10 minutes. Now it's Q&A, open floor for questions. Yeah.
How do you avoid confrontations with family members who want to speak about other family members troubling them? If an adult is not trusting their parents to tell the truth, what can the parents do? Two questions here. So
are they together, or could we do one question?
It's one from one person.
Yeah. So the first question.
How do you avoid confrontations with family members who want to speak about other family members troubling them?
Yeah. Well, I think, again, that's a boundary. I have to make it clear that I'm not available for gossip and complaints. I would say to them, have you spoken to this person? And if you haven't spoken to the person you're going to speak to me about, then I don't think it's useful, because I can't do anything in this situation. I'm going to be listening for what? So unless, we can talk together or you can talk to them, I think there's no use.
I guess, Maureen, sometimes in an Asian family, when maybe they feel a bit shy, or maybe they're afraid that they can't communicate properly and they might upset the other family member. And sometimes they might get another family member who's more tactful or who's more well-liked to sort of be an intermediary.
Yeah. So if I can help, then I would try. But if I can't help and the person's just talking to me about another person in the family, that I would, if I can do something.
Yes. Okay.
That's a different matter. So otherwise I would not engage.
Mm-hmm.
And then they know I don't, so they won't talk to me anymore. This is okay.
The other question here is, if an adult is not trusting their parents to tell the truth, what can the parents do?
So it's the parents wondering why their children are not able to be honest with them.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So again, that's again comes down to communication, doesn't it? And it's good to identify specific behaviors. Like I noticed when you came the other day, I saw or I heard, and I think there's more to this that you're maybe not feeling you can talk to me about. First of all, I want to know why you don't think you can talk to me. Something like that, just really starting the conversation, starting small. Don't go in too big, but just try to draw out and listen. As I keep saying, listen, listen, listen.
Yeah, I suppose also one has to overcome their own fear when someone asks you for help, or like in this situation where they ask you to help speak to someone, or they ask you, how should I deal with this matter?
Yeah. Yeah. So we can suggest how they might be able to speak to the person. But as much as possible, it's good not to get involved, because when, more people get involved, it often gets more complicated. That's
Yes,
the
yes.
experience that we usually have. So, yeah.
Sometimes I feel it's better that that particular person, say A speaks to me and asks me to speak to C. It is sometimes much better that A speaks to C personally
Yeah.
and be
Yeah.
very honest about it, don't you think?
Yeah, that's right. And just to say, one of the experience of doing the nonviolent communication practice groups in Sydney, one of the people who came to that, his daughter had not spoken to him for something like 11 years, because he was divorced from the wife.
Mm-hmm.
And the mother, his wife had said quite negative things about him to the daughter. The daughter lived with the mother, and no communication. And after doing, really going into this nonviolent communication, he was able to communicate by letter to his daughter in a way that he didn't react to anything, and he kept listening to her. And now he is her main confidant. She always talks to him when she's got problems. So there you go. 11 years of zero. She wouldn't talk to him for 11 years. So we can turn things around, but we have to learn the skills.
Yes. And I think you also have to learn not to be so sensitive, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes we worry about overstepping onto somebody's sensitivities.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So in a few more minutes, we could finish this session. Is there anything you like to, perhaps we can, well, I'll just mention our next program. But before I do that, yeah, our next, our follow-up program would be next month on the 3rd of July, 2021 at 5 p.m., The Art of Not Taking Sorrow.
Mm.
So I'd just like to mention this to our audience, that there is this program. Do follow up with us on that. And I would like to thank you, Maureen, for speaking to us today and to share a guided reflection to us.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me this chance to share, because, I've really learned from a lot of wise people. And in fact, I recently wrote a book called Mystic at the Edge. It's my spiritual journey, but also all of these things that I've learned from so many different people. So, yeah, it's great to be able to share what we learn from others.
Maureen, you have boundless energies and so busy, and yet you have time to write this wonderful book.
Yeah, it helped having some lockdown, actually. That gave me a little time to finish it and do all that was needed.
Book of yours it's about let me see, where is it now? Sorry. Oh yes, a Western woman colored by Asia. So
yeah, because I've spent
about your story. Yes,
I've spent 32 years in Asia. So it's been really wonderful to again learn from so many Asian traditions, so yeah, it's my great fortune.
good.
All right, so we'll do some meditation together.
Yeah, a guided reflection.
Yeah. So just start by being aware of your breath. I don't know how. Okay, so just start by watching your breath, taking your thoughts away from the physical. And as I go within, I feel that connecting with myself, I can connect with the inner peace that I am by nature, a being of peace and love. But when I let things of the world, the influence of others, the influence of the environment, and the changing times overwhelm me, I lose the inner peace that is natural to me. So as you watch your breath, just feel a deep sense of peace. Relationships are for cooperation. They can be so wonderful, and we enjoy healthy relationships. And yet, our communication can so easily break down. And we wonder, what's happened? How did it get like this? At that time, we need to start communicating honestly, humbly, sensitively. Listening, reflecting, and communicating our own feelings and needs, whilst at the same time listening for the feelings and needs of others. I may need to put boundaries in my relationships, but the aim is to protect and preserve the relationship. It's not to push the other person away. It's so that I can stay engaged, stay connected, and help steer the relationship back onto the right track. we invest a great deal in our relationships. And they are worth it. But we need to ensure that there is two-way communication, cooperation. Otherwise, the relationship is not healthy and balanced. There's not a win-win. And slowly, it will deteriorate if it's not like that. So perhaps it's time again to invest in the relationship, giving it the attention, giving myself the training I need, the space I need. The clarity that I need to move forward. There's love behind whatever I am intending, not fear. Love. So just in silence for another minute, just love the self, love the other. This is the seed. Om. I am Shanti. Peace. So as we come out of our meditation, stay in that feeling of peace. Om Shanti.
Thank you very much, Maureen. It's been great having you, and I'm sure everyone enjoyed the talk about the chit chat. And just to remind everyone, the art of not taking sorrow, next July the 3rd, that's our next topic, 5 p.m. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you. Been nice to be with you.